Hey, everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of the Skewed and Reviewed Skewedcast. I'm Gareth, creator of Skewed and Reviewed. You can catch us each week also on BJ Shea's Geek Nation on KISW FM. We simulcast on our site, so you can pick up the rebroadcast there, or you can go to KISW.com and follow the links to BJ's Geek Nation. Here are topics each week in Pinal Central network of papers at pinalcentral.com under keyword skewed. You can read our reviews. And of course, we have our Skewed and Reviewed magazine that we are going to happily have some interesting stuff on the next cover. And we will be putting Borderlands 3 and Jedi Fallen Order on the cover of our June issue, as well as the wrap-up of E3, and Michael and I will be there covering. I'm joined, as always, with Justin and Michael, and we're going to be going over some movies, games, TV, pop culture stuff, and glad you're here. And so let's start off with just some quick news before we get into the topics. Razer has revealed some new Star Wars items the other day that came just before the May the 4th celebration. What they have, and we do have pictures and information on the website at sknr.net, are three new products. They have the Razer Black Widow Light Silent mechanical keyboard. Now it is done up as a Stormtrooper edition. There is the Razer Atheros wireless mouse, which is also done up like a Stormtrooper. And then, of course, the Goliathus extended gaming mouse pad, also in a Stormtrooper motif. Now, the three of these are available, and basically for those people who are looking for quality gaming products with the Star Wars peripheral, this would be fantastic. The keyboard has suggested retail of $99.99. The mouse has a suggested retail of $59.99, and the gaming mouse mat is suggested retail of $34.99. They're available at the outlets that carry Razer, which is pretty much the Razer store, as well as most of the major retailers. So basically, if you're looking for some high-quality products at a very affordable price, because I think most of us can agree for products of that quality, these are very reasonable prices. Do check them out, because that does look to be a lot of fun. Also, we just got news in from London that the Call of Duty World League, which has expanded to 5 major franchise cities and more, has announced that 100 Thieves were the big winners at CWL London. We also have been told that CWL will go to Anaheim in June. And of course, coming up soon, they also have Miami Beach in July, and tickets are on sale. So if you're a fan of Call of Duty and you like to see esports and the high-end gaming, you will want to check that out. And also, on a further note, while it's pretty much expected information, we have received word that the new Call of Duty should be announced very soon. There are some people saying the announcement's going to come in June. Usually by this time we've heard of it. Others say it could be coming anytime soon. We have high reason to believe it is a new Modern Warfare game, and that it will indeed have a campaign attached to it, which was missing from Black Ops 4. A lot of people were really excited about this. Apparently there's a lot of really strong buzz inside the company. They're extremely excited about this one, more so than some recent games. So we're looking forward to hearing what they have, and of course hoping we get a chance to see and play it at E3. Well, guys, one thing we definitely got to see a lot of the other day was Borderlands 3, as Gearbox had a very impressive live stream. So, Justin, why don't you start us off? Tell us what you thought of what was shown.
Yeah, I was actually pretty impressed. It does look quite a bit like Borderlands 2, but it's honestly not a bad thing. I love Borderlands 2, and it looks like they're doing a very iterative sequel, so they're taking a lot of what works with the previous one and sort of adding upon it. I think this is definitely the right way to go. They're not changing a whole bunch that works about it, but a lot of the things that they are adding, I think, are pretty good additions, and it does look to be the biggest of the franchise yet. And I think for when they showed the first trailer and we were talking about our impressions, one of the concerns of mine was I was really hoping that we would maybe get to see other planets and other locations in the Borderlands universe, because we've had 2 games so far that take place on Pandora itself. And I think the setting is sort of over and done with as far as I'm concerned. And I think it's such a vibrant and interesting setting that they could maybe explore other planets. And that seems to be exactly what they're doing. They showed off and talked quite a bit about, I guess you have a ship that sort of serves as your hub, and that's where you kind of shop and talk to your NPC buddies and everything. And you can fly to different planets, and that will be how you get around the galaxy, and all the different levels will be different planets in the Borderlands universe, which is exactly the route that I think that they should have gone. So I'm very excited about that. I think their artists are very talented, and it's a very interesting universe. So I'm more than anything else interested to see them expand this universe in different planets and in different ways. So I'm very excited about that. The characters and progression system seems to be pretty interesting. There's 3 active abilities per character now. So I think that leads to more customization. So I'm definitely looking forward to it. And it does look to be pretty far along. It's very polished so far. So gonna look forward to seeing more. I think at E3 is what they said they're going to be showing it off. Mm-hmm. So looking good so far.
And Michael, your take, please.
Yeah, and I agree with Justin. I guess I had heard that they had considered going maybe a different stylistic route for a little while, but when it comes back to it, that's what people expect from Borderlands. So I'm excited that it looks like the other Borderlands 1 and 2. I don't necessarily think that art style is a bad thing. I also think, based on, obviously they did the redo of the graphics, but I think Borderlands 1, even before it was redone, and Borderlands 2, I think that graphic style holds up a lot like World of Warcraft does. It holds up for years to come, so it doesn't have to be they don't have to do a lot of tweaking to make it still relevant and nice looking in today's market. So I think it's a smart move on their part. Why change something when people weren't complaining about it? And to Justin's point, being able to visit different planets, your base is kind of a spaceship now, which is cool. I think one of the planets you get to visit is Atlas, where one of the gun manufacturers' headquarters is located. That kind of stuff. They're going to have some destructible cover this time around. So they're adding a lot of things that I think people have maybe asked for, some changes, maybe some improvements, how some of the things handle, but they're still sticking to the core gameplay, and they're still sticking to what makes Borderlands, the graphic look, the insane number of guns with their various upgrades and modifications. One of the things that I thought was interesting is they're actually going to be tying in the Tales from the Borderland graphic adventure. There's going to be some of the storyline is going to be based off of that Telltale series of games, which is kind of interesting. So if you've played all the Borderlands games except Tales from the Borderlands, probably not a bad idea to go and pick it up and play through it. The Telltale games in general, my experience, I've played through several of them, have been pretty easy to get through. Pretty interesting storyline. I assume they're still available on Steam, even though Telltale no longer exists. So again, if you have it and haven't had a chance to play through it, it's something that is going to tie into some of that storyline as well. So all in all, I think they really put a lot of thought and effort into this game. It doesn't look like it's just going to be a cash grab on the previous Borderlands games. So I think adding all of that, again, I think the main storyline is supposed to be 30 if you go through it as quickly as you can, not counting side quests. They've added some things like the loot that's dropped is not going to be, you can play it specific, so you're not all running for the same guns. You can either have it played with the new style, where each individual gets their own loot drops, a la things like the Division 2, or you can even play Borderlands 2 style, where it's all, everybody's running for the guns that are dropped. So again, I think that's a good change, a nice change. Offline co-op is going to be available, so it's not going to be required only online all the time. So again, I think they really listened to their fan base. They really knew what kind of worked, what didn't work as well, and they're really trying to keep it to the same heart of Borderlands. So I'm excited for it. I think it's going to be probably, if everything's done right, I think it'll probably be one of my favorite games of the year when it comes out.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it because I definitely think they not only expanded the universe, but like you mentioned, the destructible cover, and then they showed off some other things like you can duck now, you can mantle. If you fall down, you can grab on the ledge and mantle up. You can slide, things that people have been saying, that are common in a lot of shooters now. The guns have alternate fire modes, which I thought was really impressive. Like they showed this pistol that went from shooting bullets to firing rockets with an alternate fire mode. And the fact that you have over 1 billion weapons in the game, they claim, I definitely think you're not going to get bored anytime soon of the firepower. And it looks like they've taken the best elements. And of course, when you're on the spaceship, a lot of familiar faces are on the ship from past Borderlands games as NPC characters that are going around. So, you know, they look like they've got a fantastic mix. I'm looking forward to seeing how the co-op play works. And then, as you mentioned, it's going to be at E3. I believe they also, I think they mentioned Gamescom. I know they mentioned PAX. So we'll definitely see it, which makes sense because PAX is a Labor Day weekend, end of August, and it's coming out in September. So this is, you know, their big chance. So I'm looking forward to it because I'm going, well, there's at least 2 chances to play it and really get our hands on the thing. And who knows if they're going to be at San Diego Comic-Con. I know when they had the pre-sequel there, Borderlands, the pre-sequel, they had a very interesting thing. I didn't get a chance to go to it because we sent someone else because it was the press time was the day before we got in. But they had a, well, actually, it was the day we were driving over, excuse me. It was like during the preview night. They had a, I guess it's basically a laser tag arena would be the way to set it, to describe it. They did a Borderlands, the pre-sequel laser tag arena over in Petco Field's parking lot, apparently. And, you know, they've had some interesting things. I know you'll probably get a laugh out of that, Michael. That's the big baseball stadium. It's right across the street. And they've done things like have zombie runs, zombie obstacle courses, and all kinds of things there, which was hysterical seeing, you know, you would see these people in these running outfits on the light rail going in, and you're thinking, okay, it's Thursday morning, and they're like, I'm all set. I'm going to try. And even though it wasn't happening until later that night, and then you see the video, like they're running through the concourses, and all of a sudden they come pouring out of the bending halls, and they like it's really happening. And, you know, we had the Call of Duty zombie escape room. But either way, we'll have a lot of Comic-Con discussions in the near future. Switching over, wanted to discuss, there's been a lot of discussion about the Madbox not happening. And I thought about some of the consoles that we heard about, you know, Steambox, and of course there was the Atari one that is still out there in limbo. And we'll start with you, Michael. Do you think a new console outside of the ones from Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony can really make it in today's market? And if so, what would it take for that to happen?
Well, I will touch on the Atari one because I do have that one coming at the end of the year. Well, mid 2019, so a November timeframe. Because I did buy it, but not for the console perspective, but more for the nostalgia perspective. But yeah, I mean, I don't think the Madbox thing is too much of a surprise. I mean, there's always somebody trying to compete against the likes of Nintendo or Microsoft or Sony. And what we usually end up with is either a PC light gaming device, the Steam machines being one of those with Steam OS, where, you know, it's Linux based. You're limiting your market to Linux supported games, which Steam does have several hundred of, but there's multiple thousands of games that wouldn't support it. And then you have these other contenders, much like the Madbox coming in. And also we see Google's approach, which is kind of more of a streaming approach anyway. But I think the problem with all of these consoles isn't the hardware. And I think that's where a lot of people get caught up, and they look at the hardware. They say, oh, this hardware is going to be able to do so many teraflops. It's going to be running so much faster than a PlayStation Pro or an Xbox. And what they forget is that you don't have the content for those things. Most people who want a gaming box or a gaming, I don't want to say PC, but a console of that, you know, if that fortitude they can build one themselves cheaper than what they can buy them for. And most of those are going to be boxes running Windows or Linux that play video games, Pi OS, you know, running Raspberry Pi. So there are lots of options for people who want to do that kind of thing. I don't think any new, and we've seen a lot of them come and go. Ouya, there's been several that have tried to go this route before. And I think the problem is you're not going to get AAA developers on board developing for your console specifically. I mean, what's their incentive? They're already building for the PC market, which is, you know, larger than Xbox and PS4 combined. You have Sony, who already has a major footload, has the money for one to throw into this and has a major foothold in the marketplace. Microsoft came in at a good time where Sega was kind of dropping out of the picture and Microsoft was kind of coming in and scooping up some of those players. And then of course Nintendo's been around forever. I just don't think we're ever going to see a situation. I can see one of those three players, Microsoft potentially going away, but I don't think we're ever going to see another major contender come in. I think even if Sega were to decide to go into the hardware business now and try to bring back a Dreamcast type version or compete with the likes of Sony and Microsoft, I don't even think Sega could do that at this point. So one of these companies coming in and saying, yeah, we're going to build this box that's VR capable, that's super fast, and we'll be able to play all these games. There's no incentive for AAA supporters to really support those, and you're not going to pull enough of the market to make it worthwhile. So again, I think Google has a really interesting take. They're coming in more with a streaming box, being able to play games, stream games from the PC or stream them from their service, which is, it's a different environment. That's kind of like saying, what Roku does or Apple TV does. They didn't come in with a new standard of a Blu-ray player or a new standard of media player. All they're taking is what's already out there existing and then streaming it to a box. I think that's kind of what Google's play is on this. Again, they're not really doing it as a new console. They're doing it more of a on-demand delivery service to your iPad or your Android tablet or your PC or whatever you want to do to. So I just don't think anybody in this market, unless they have some sort of niche that they're gonna go after, I'm not surprised at all that we see this particular box failing. I know they're blaming it on Google's announcement, saying, "Oh, Google said it's not in a box anymore, so we had all these investors pull out." Yeah, you can blame Google for bringing something new to the table, but the reality is, I just don't think they were going to recoup what they were going to spend on it, honestly.
And Justin, your take, please.
Yeah, I definitely think Michael is completely 100% right on all this, and just to kind of to add to that, I think there's two separate markets for this. So I think you can actually succeed a little bit as a niche for kind of what Atari is doing with their sort of nostalgia boxes. You putting together a simple emulator box, which is effectively what a lot of these are, is where you have a simple computer inside a frame that obviously you can hook up to a television and connect a couple controllers to, and then the computer just runs essentially an emulator for older games. So that someone like Sega or Atari or some of these older companies can capitalize on that and be semi-successful, putting out a relatively affordable box that has a chunk of their library. That's one thing, and I think they can be successful doing that. But if you're trying to compete with the big three, I think that's tremendously difficult. And I think it's, if you're a smaller company, virtually impossible. The Slightly Mad Studios, all the power to them for the attempt. But I think one thing to keep in mind with a lot of these larger companies is they have massive infrastructures in place in order to design these consoles and manufacture them and ship them around the world. And they have massive contracts with a lot of these publishers that a studio like Slightly Mad can probably not bring to the table. They don't have that infrastructure in place. They don't have the supply chains in place to do it. Another thing to keep in mind is that a lot of times these consoles are sold at a loss. I mean, Nintendo's the only one where they try to either sell at break even. I know the Wii U was sold at a loss, but most of their consoles through their history is usually they try to sell at a break even price or a slight profit, which kind of goes to show where the hardware is at in terms of what is affordable. If you're trying to sell a console at a $200 to $300 price point, just kind of look at what Nintendo is releasing, as an example of what a company can buy and put into a box for that kind of money. This is different than Sony and Microsoft, who obviously their consoles tend to be much more powerful, but they're also sold at a loss. It means they're losing money every time they sell them. That is up until later in the console's life cycle. So the question then comes, where do they get their money from? largely through their publishing deals and, selling software. They get a bit of a cut per copy of software that's sold on their systems, and that's how they make a very good amount of money. It's not the console itself usually, until obviously way later in the console life cycle. It's with the software sales. So again, for a small company, it's virtually impossible. They were touting a box that's very, very powerful, which, that means that they would have been selling it at a loss. So what is the business plan there? How are they going to attract all these publishers to sell copies on this Madbox? I just don't see it happening. And if you're a big company where you can make the supply chain work, and maybe you do have the infrastructure, even then it's very difficult, because I think 3 is sort of the sweet spot right now, because for most people, just anecdotally, they either have one between an Xbox and a PlayStation, and then they also have the Nintendo console. So one or the other, plus a Nintendo, I think that's reasonable for most people. Having another one in the market, I think, is too crowded. It's just going to be too difficult for them. And like what Michael was saying, Google is a large enough company that they could probably compete, but what they're competing with is almost a completely different thing. It's an entirely internet-based platform, which is not quite the same thing as what Microsoft and Sony and Nintendo have made their business plans on.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, it's no secret that Sony's got a new console coming. It's no secret that Microsoft is expected to announce one at E3. And then we've heard about the new editions of the Switch that are coming out with, a little better graphics, that sort of thing. And so I think consumers are basically saying, all right, we kind of have an idea that these 3 things are definitely going to come to market. We know that third-party developers are going to support them. We know that at least in the case of Sony and Nintendo, there'll be quite a bit of exclusives. And, let's see what they have, because, like I said, can you imagine going out and spending the money to buy one of these consoles and then finding out that A, basically it's not getting a lot of support, B, you're not finding a lot of people to play with online, and C, oh gee, all the good content's on all the other consoles already. So definitely a tough thing to do, that is for sure.
Yeah, and one more thing I wanted to add before we move on. I think with all of the consoles that we've discussed as well, there's a killer app that makes it a reason to have the console, right? Mm-hmm. People buy Sony consoles because of the killer games, God of War or Uncharted or whatever the game of the day happens to be for that. Microsoft was always big on Halo. Halo was kind of the driving force. Without Halo, would Microsoft even exist as a console developer now? Probably not, right? That's kind of what got them in the door. Nintendo obviously got a lot of it from when the video game market crashed in the 80s, when Atari was gone. Nintendo got into a position where they wouldn't have thought there was even a market there, and everybody got on board with it, Nintendo. So Nintendo had the nostalgia factor. They had a lot of brand loyalty already before PlayStation and Microsoft came along. And of course, they had the characters, the Donkey Kongs and the Zeldas and the Mario Brothers. So if there's anything else, and we kind of see that problem with VR right now. Everybody's kind of waiting for which VR is going to take the lead. Sony has the big lead now because they have the console. Vive and Oculus, now Steam releasing their own VR setup. They're all vying for, I think, the other half of this pie. And I think the first person to come out with that killer app, with that killer game that everybody has to play, is going to be the market leader. If somebody like, if they want to have a new console, if somebody wants to come back, whether the Madbox or Slightly Mad Studios or anybody else wants to come out with a console that's going to compete with anything, they have to have that killer app. It has to be some game from some committed developer that's so outstanding that you're willing to bank an entire console on that alone, and people are willing to buy a console to play just that game. And I don't think we have that, at least not yet, for anything outside of the big 3 in particular.
Yeah, and you won't get that either unless somebody decides to bankroll the production of a risky game that ends up really taking off and getting buzz, or they do what Microsoft did and basically pay through the nose to make sure that Halo launched on their console and their console only. And they had the deep pockets to do that. I don't think someone else is going to do that. And besides, that game, I don't even know if that would work nowadays. I think people would say, okay, am I going to pay all this money for one game? Let's see a library full. It's a really tough call, but it's a uphill battle. So speaking of uphill battles, let's talk about something a little more positive. And we'll start with Justin on this. We've got news that we've talked about that Disney is attempting to purchase the remaining 30% interest in Hulu, so they'll own it outright. They recently sold for $10 billion and change the Fox Sports and regional sports stations that they were required to unload after they got them from Fox due to the fact that they owned ESPN, and the regulatory committee said, okay, this could be too much of antitrust. But now we've got the word that there is a live-action Hellstorm and Ghost-Rider series coming to Hulu. And now we've also heard that they apparently are willing to wait the 24 months it's going to take before they can put the canceled Netflix shows back into either one of the FX networks or Hulu. And of course, no surprise, right as we're about to see Star Wars Galaxy's Edge open, they made the formal announcement of the Marvel area at California Adventure coming in 2020, which is great considering the Avengers just passed $2 billion worldwide today in only a week. So we'll start with you. What do you think about this maneuvering with the live-action, darker Marvel characters, and what do you think's coming?
Yeah, I think it makes sense strategically. One thing that's sort of confusing to me, just because Disney's obviously putting quite a bit of resources forward to acquire Hulu here. They're also launching their own streaming service themselves, so it'll be kind of interesting to see how they try to differentiate both services. What you just said sort of just lit a bit of an idea in my mind that maybe they're going to use one service as more of the mature content that they might not be able to put on their streaming service, while they might sort of separate everything else onto the Disney streaming service. I do wonder if that might cause some problems later, for a fan that might want if you're a Marvel fan, you want to see everything. If you have to buy both services to do it, it'll be kind of interesting to see how they kind of do this strategically. But I think it's, kind of an exciting time just because, as you said, Endgame, it's made a ton of money, and it's sort of capped off their third phase and really kind of like their first major story arc of the MCU. I've been reading quite a bit that they have a lot of plans for television shows, especially television shows featuring a lot of the characters from these first three phases, which is a very interesting move. You'd think a lot of these these characters that were in films would continue on the silver screen on films, but it seems like they're kind of transitioning them to be in television shows, which it goes to show to me that they're very serious about the quality of the content that they're going to be putting on these streaming services, that they're probably going to be putting a lot of resources into the quality of these TV shows, which is exciting. The Marvel television shows on Netflix up till now have been mostly like a smaller scale, which I'm completely fine with. I absolutely loved Daredevil. And I think it makes sense to kind of use something like Netflix for, the street level crime kind of stuff that you might see in Marvel. But the fact that we'll be seeing like a Loki show or a show maybe centered on Falcon and Winter Soldier, for instance, very interesting ideas. I would think that a lot of those kind of characters would continue on in the films, but it'll be very exciting to see what kind of content we see in television form from Disney.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right on that. And Michael, your take, please.
Yeah, and I agree. I think what we're seeing is they're trying to identify, I think, what's constitute a blockbuster, what's going to draw crowds into the theater, and what are some of the minor characters who still have stories to tell, but may not be able to carry a big budget film on their own. And what we've seen, I think, with what Disney's trying to do with some of the scenes we've seen from The Mandalorian, some of the other television shows that they've kind of done in the past, is they're okay to throw money at a smaller budget idea and bring that to the television streaming service first. I think they understand that a lot of those characters have enough draw to keep a major television show going, but they may not necessarily, they might not be big enough to draw the big crowds to the theater, and that's okay. The fact that we're going to continue to see them maybe put some money into things like Ghost-Rider and Hellstorm, and maybe even bring back Daredevil in a couple of years when they can. They show that we still have some interest in those characters. And the other thing that they can do to tie those together is maybe introduce those characters through background stories or intro stories on the television series, and then they can still have cameos or smaller presences on the bigger screen, but they tie everything together. So if you want to see the next Avengers movie that's coming out, it ties into some of the backstory that we've seen on one of the Disney streaming shows. I know Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. kind of did that in the first season a little bit. They kind of would bring in, I know Samuel Jackson, I think, was at the end of the first season. And they kind of, and Phil Coulson obviously had a part in the Avengers movies, and they've tied those together to some degree. I think, what I hope is that Disney is going to take this as an opportunity to maybe bring those all together into one huge universe and play off each other a little bit more than what they've done so far. So yeah, I think the ability for them to introduce those characters, have them as key components in the universe, but not have them draw the big screen appeal, and still, have enough interest to drive those series, I think is a smart move for Disney. I'll be interested to see how it turns out.
Yeah, definitely so. Well, there's definitely been a lot of interesting stuff covered this week. I did want to mention briefly in passing, sadly, we lost Peter Mayhew this week. I remember getting to meet him at a Creation Entertainment show just before we left Washington and opened the office down in Arizona, and he was very humble and classy guy. It was very nice, very engaging. Got to just have a conversation with him in between autograph sessions. So definitely a sad moment and a real loss. And I don't know if you guys saw that he was living in Texas now, and he was scheduled to be at a convention in Dallas this weekend signing autographs. And they put up a picture of him and flowers and memorial books at his booth so people could come by, leave a donation for the family if they wanted to, or a charity. I just saw a box that said donations. I wasn't sure if it was for the family or for a charity he supported, but people came by and left personal messages for the family in the book. So I thought that was a really classy move on their part to do something like that, because very tragic and unexpected. So anyway, guys, I think that's going to do it for this week. We'll have more stuff next week, of course. So until then, everybody, thank you so much for watching, and we will look forward to talking to you again next week. Until then, have a very safe week and take care.